A silence so painful settled over the elegant rooftop restaurant that even strangers stopped pretending not to notice. For an entire hour, one woman sat alone at a beautifully decorated table, glancing at the entrance every few minutes while her untouched meal grew cold. People whispered that she had been abandoned, humiliated, and forgotten. But no one could have imagined that one simple question from a struggling single father would uncover a truth that would change both of their lives forever. Before we begin this unforgettable journey, if you believe kindness can heal broken hearts, forgiveness can rewrite the future, and hope can appear when life feels impossible, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community that believes every act of compassion matters. Vivian Mercer had spent 15 years building one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country. Newspapers called her brilliant, fearless, and unstoppable, but very few people knew how lonely success had become. She had sacrificed birthdays, friendships, vacations, and nearly every chance at a normal life while building an empire from nothing. She rarely accepted invitations outside of work, and when she finally agreed to meet someone for lunch after months of persuasion from close friends, she quietly hoped that maybe life had decided to offer her something money never could. She arrived early at a beautiful restaurant overlooking the city park, dressed elegantly but modestly, carrying nothing except a small handbag and the nervous excitement of someone opening a new chapter. The reservation had been made weeks earlier. Flowers decorated the table, sunlight poured through enormous windows, and soft piano music floated gently through the dining room. Every few minutes Vivian looked toward the entrance expecting to see the man she had agreed to meet. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Then 45. She checked her phone again. No message. No apology. No explanation. The waiter politely asked whether she wished to order, but she smiled weakly and asked for a little more time. People nearby quietly noticed the lonely woman sitting at the elegant table. Some assumed she had been stood up. Others looked away, embarrassed for her. Vivian kept telling herself there had to be a reason. Traffic. An emergency. Anything. But after an hour, hope slowly dissolved into disappointment. She lowered her eyes, trying to hide tears that threatened to escape. She had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without fear, yet this simple moment of rejection hurt more than any business failure she had ever experienced. Across the restaurant sat Owen Barrett, a widowed father raising his 8-year-old daughter Clara alone. Owen worked as a maintenance supervisor at a nearby community center. His paycheck barely covered rent, groceries, and Clara's school expenses. They were only eating at the restaurant because Clara had won a reading competition at school, and Owen had promised to celebrate with one special lunch even if it meant cutting back on his own meals for the rest of the week. Clara noticed Vivian before anyone else. Children often see sadness adults try to hide. She quietly asked her father why the lady looked so lonely. Owen glanced across the room and immediately understood. He had experienced loneliness after losing his wife years earlier. He knew the look of someone pretending everything was fine while quietly falling apart inside. He hesitated. Walking into another person's painful moment felt intrusive. Yet something in his heart refused to ignore it. Clara simply smiled and whispered that maybe the lady needed someone to remind her she wasn't invisible. After asking the waiter if it would be appropriate, Owen slowly approached Vivian's table. He stood respectfully several feet away, not wanting to invade her space. His voice was calm and gentle as he asked one simple question. He wondered whether she was waiting for someone who truly deserved her time. The question caught Vivian completely off guard. It wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't gossip. It was sincere concern wrapped in quiet respect. For the first time that afternoon, someone wasn't looking at her with embarrassment. Someone was looking at her as a human being. Vivian gave a small, tired smile and admitted she no longer knew the answer. Whoever had promised to meet her clearly wasn't coming. Owen nodded gently. Instead of offering empty comfort, he simply wished her better days ahead and turned to leave. But before he reached his own table, Vivian surprised herself by asking if he and his daughter would join her for lunch. She confessed that eating alone suddenly felt much heavier than sharing a table with kind strangers. Owen hesitated. Pride told him to decline. His wallet reminded him he couldn't possibly repay such generosity. But Clara's bright smile encouraged him, and he accepted only after Vivian insisted that kindness never creates debt. What began as an awkward lunch slowly became one of the most genuine conversations any of them had experienced in years. Owen spoke honestly about losing his wife to illness, learning to braid his daughter's hair through online videos, working overtime whenever possible, and constantly worrying whether he was giving Clara enough opportunities. Vivian listened with complete attention. She admired how he spoke about fatherhood not as a burden but as the greatest privilege of his life. When Owen politely asked what Vivian did for work, she simply replied that she managed a technology company. She deliberately avoided mentioning that she was its founder and chief executive. She wanted one conversation where people weren't impressed by titles or wealth. Clara happily described her dream of becoming an architect who designed homes where lonely people would always feel welcome. Her innocent imagination filled the table with warmth that money could never purchase. As lunch ended, Vivian quietly paid the bill before Owen could object. He thanked her sincerely but insisted he wanted to repay her someday. Vivian smiled and told him that if he truly wished to repay her, he should simply continue raising Clara into the compassionate young girl she was already becoming. Days passed, yet Vivian couldn't stop thinking about the little family she had met. Their lives were financially difficult, yet their love for each other created a richness she realized had been missing from her own success. Meanwhile, Owen returned to his ordinary routine completely unaware of who Vivian really was. He simply remembered meeting a lonely woman who deserved far better than being forgotten. Several weeks later, the community center where Owen worked announced devastating budget cuts. Positions would be eliminated, including his own. Panic spread among employees. Owen worried constantly about paying rent and keeping Clara in her school. That same week Vivian visited the community center anonymously after learning about a local youth education program struggling to survive. As she toured the aging building, she recognized Owen repairing broken equipment while encouraging frightened coworkers who had just learned about the layoffs. Even after discovering he might lose everything, Owen spent his afternoon helping others feel hopeful. Vivian quietly observed from a distance. Leadership wasn't about expensive offices or polished speeches. Real leadership looked exactly like this exhausted father lifting everyone else's spirits while carrying unbearable uncertainty himself. She introduced herself after his shift. Owen looked surprised but genuinely happy to see her again. Only then did another employee excitedly recognize Vivian as the famous CEO whose company dominated international headlines. Owen froze in disbelief. Suddenly every moment from the restaurant replayed in his mind. He remembered treating her simply as another human being instead of someone powerful. Vivian laughed softly and admitted that was exactly why she treasured meeting him. She explained that nearly everyone approached her because of her position, influence, or wealth. Owen had approached because he saw another person hurting. That difference meant everything. Instead of offering Owen a charity check or an easy gift, Vivian proposed something entirely unexpected. Her company planned to expand its community outreach programs focused on education, family support, and youth development. She needed someone capable of leading those projects with genuine compassion rather than corporate ambition. She offered Owen an interview, not because she felt sorry for him, but because she believed his character qualified him. Owen accepted nervously. The interview surprised every executive involved. Vivian deliberately removed herself from the decision-making process so the hiring panel would evaluate Owen fairly. They questioned him about management, budgeting, conflict resolution, and leadership. His answers weren't polished corporate language. They were honest stories. He described organizing volunteers after storms damaged neighborhood homes. He explained how listening solved more problems than shouting. He shared how raising Clara had taught him patience, responsibility, and resilience better than any business seminar ever could. When the interviews concluded, every executive independently recommended hiring him. Months later, Owen transformed the outreach division into one of the company's proudest achievements. Programs expanded into underserved neighborhoods. Scholarships increased. Community centers received new technology and educational resources. Volunteer participation doubled because employees genuinely believed in the mission. Vivian often visited events without media attention, quietly watching children laugh inside renovated classrooms. One afternoon she admitted to Owen that being stood up at that restaurant had once felt like one of the most humiliating moments of her life. Now she considered it one of the greatest blessings. If that painful afternoon had never happened, she never would have met Clara, never would have discovered Owen's remarkable character, and never would have learned that success without meaningful human connection leaves even the richest achievements feeling empty. Owen smiled and confessed that he almost hadn't walked over that day. Fear had nearly convinced him to stay silent. He realized how often people assume someone else's pain isn't their business, when sometimes a single compassionate question becomes the beginning of someone's healing. Clara continued growing into the thoughtful young girl everyone admired. Inspired by both her father and Vivian, she organized kindness projects at school, encouraging classmates to include lonely students during lunch and create welcome cards for new families moving into town. Years later, when reporters asked Vivian what the smartest business decision of her career had been, they expected her to mention investments or groundbreaking technology. Instead, she smiled and said the greatest decision she ever made was accepting lunch with two strangers after the worst hour of her personal life. She explained that companies grow through innovation, but lives change through compassion. Numbers create profit. Kindness creates purpose. Her answer spread across newspapers not because it sounded clever, but because people recognized its truth. Many readers quietly remembered moments when they had walked past someone hurting without stopping. Others remembered strangers whose simple kindness had rescued them during their darkest days. Before we reach the end of this story, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when one small act of kindness completely changed your life or restored your faith in people? Please leave a meaningful comment below because your story may become the encouragement someone else desperately needs today. Vivian never forgot the painful hour she spent alone, but she no longer remembered it with sadness. She remembered it as the doorway to unexpected friendship, renewed purpose, and a reminder that life's greatest blessings sometimes arrive disguised as heartbreaking disappointments. Owen never forgot asking one simple question that afternoon, because it taught him that compassion rarely requires perfect words. It simply requires the courage to notice another person's pain. And Clara grew up believing that no one should ever feel invisible because every heart carries a story that deserves kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May this story remind you that one conversation, one question, one moment of compassion, and one choice to care can completely transform a life, sometimes including your own.